The Roads to Carbon Neutral, presented by Total. Hello, I'm Emma Crosby. Welcome to The Roads to Carbon Neutral. This series examines how countries, companies and communities have set a bold ambition to tackle climate change and achieve net zero carbon emissions by the second half of this century. Well, in this edition, we're going to focus on the future of sustainable mobility. Coming up, from the near electric car revolution to mind-blowing transport innovations of the future, our gathered global experts set out the route towards sustainable mobility.
So we are going to adapt ourselves to make sure we make electricity available for cars where the customer needs it.
Reporter Emmeline Nsingian-Kosi examines what's driving change around the world.
I'll take a closer look at the electric charging solutions that our partners Total are rolling out across the world. Plus, I examine the research and development that is accelerating travel by electric vehicle.
The principle of Formula E is to take as much energy as possible from the battery and to bring it to the wheel to move the car with as low losses as possible.
And we throw a light on the innovative ideas and transport solutions being developed for the next 30 years. Let's begin with the key trends and challenges that we face on our journey towards sustainable mobility. We'll hear from Total's executive team and other expert voices shaping the future. In the 2 centuries since the introduction of mechanized transportation, the capacity, speed and efficiency of transit systems has been dramatically improved. Road transport, long-haul flights, mass transit systems and container ships have all fueled globalization and boosted the world economy. People are freer to travel faster and further than ever.
Mobility is the basis of our life. It's for us to go to work, to see friends, to go to hospitals, etc. And it's the basis of economical activity on a global basis. So trade, which is based on to 90% on ships, basically, connects the world.
I think that the more people we have on the planet, the more the people will develop, the more they will need mobility. But we need also to reduce the emission, reduce the CO2.
Climate change and air pollution, together with the need to reduce the chronic congestion in our cities, requires radical innovations within transport. We need to create sustainable mobility solutions.
Energy efficiency, it's a key point, because before trying to change to new energy, to new situation, to new solution, we have first of all to save as much energy as we can. We start 20 years ago selling fuels which are more efficient, selling lubricants which allow an energy efficiency, assisting the car manufacturer to improve the efficiency of the car is something we have done for many years. The same for ships, the same for planes. And if you can save 1% or 2% per year just by energy saving, that's a big challenge and a big achievement.
The switch to sustainable mobility also requires new supply chains on the material side. The options are basically battery electric or hydrogen based. So you need a global hydrogen economy. That basically means that there needs to be division of labor between countries that actually can basically produce green hydrogen at scale. And the same is true for batteries. So batteries are obviously innovating. So far, it's all about lithium-ion batteries. So you need to create equitable supply chains and that this material can be sourced in a responsible way.
If we're to meet our goal of a carbon neutral world, a new revolution in transport is required. Transport is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, and it's the fastest growing source of global emissions. Out of all forms, road transport accounts for more than 70% of these emissions. A key component to a successful transition to sustainable mobility is developing a mix of alternative energies for transport systems. the move towards cleaner fuel has already begun in earnest.
In maritime mobility, the trends are quite specific. A big job has been done in 2020 with the reduction of the sulfur content of the fuel. And now we have moved again to a new worldwide regulation to reduce the CO2 emission of the ship. And to do that, so you need to change the fuel you are using, which are fossil fuel today. The first one, which is ready available, which is liquefied natural gas. This allows to reduce by about 20% the CO2 emission. This is available now in a few ports worldwide. Total is part of these actors on this activity. And there is some solutions which are still under investigation, like methanol or ammoniac.
In mass transit, Germany's new hydrogen-powered trains are already rolling. China has 500,000 electric buses already in circulation.
30-40% of an electric vehicle's cost will be associated with the battery. So innovation in battery technology, that will have the biggest impact in reducing the overall cost of electric vehicles. A $5,000 electric vehicle was announced in China. So if that is the kind of electric vehicle costs that are coming out, we will see a significant change in people's perceptions of e-vehicles being a more costly option than fossil fuel or internal combustion engine vehicles.
For personal car ownership, global sales of electric vehicles accelerated fast in 2020, rising by 43% to 3 million plus. And European consumers more than doubled their purchases of EVs, pushing Europe past China as the world's biggest market for them.
There's a lot of talk about the rapid growth of electric vehicles for family cars, but there's around 4 million electric four-wheelers been sold as of last year or 2019. By comparison, there's 200 to 250 million electric two-wheelers been sold, so a higher number of the two-wheelers. These are predominantly in Asia. 99% of the world's electric buses are used within China. Asian countries have the ability to really lead the way with the switch to electric mobility.
Carbon-free mobility can't happen overnight. It's an ambition that needs the global community to mobilize.
So Total has shifted to e-mobility to supply electricity to our customer once they will shift to e-mobility. This is a shift which will not happen in one day. We are still going to supply petroleum product in service station like we did for 50 years now. And together with that, we are going to supply electricity for mobility. But electricity is everywhere, so it's not something you are supplying in one given place like a service station, but you are going to give it where people need it. At home, at work, in a parking, in the street, perhaps in a service station on the motorway. So we are going to adapt ourselves to make sure we make electricity available for cars where the customer needs it.
The world is on the move. Cities are growing and fastest in emerging market economies. The number of vehicles is on the rise globally, and it's estimated there'll be more than 2 billion cars on the road by 2040. It's essential that these 2 billion are sustainable. Electric vehicles are a critical part of our transportation future, given their potential to dramatically cut global warming emissions. While electric vehicles may feel like a 21st century invention, they were actually at the forefront of the automobile revolution some 200 years ago. One of the first practical electrical cars was created by British inventor Thomas Parker back in 1884. The year before, the world's first production car, the Benz patent motor wagon. In 1899, it was an electric car, the Jamais Content, that became the first vehicle to go over 100 kilometers an hour. And at the start of the 20th century, electric cars accounted for around a third of vehicles on the road in America. But Ford's development of the mass-produced Model T would end the electric party. By the 1930s, electric vehicles had all but disappeared from our roads. In 1971, they had a brief moment back in the spotlight when NASA drove an electric vehicle where no car had been before. The 90s was a turning point for the electric car. The Toyota Prius became the first hybrid car to be mass-produced. sparking an electric revolution and bringing the electric car back into the mainstream. Plug-in electric vehicles are an important element in the ambitious global target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, many countries have introduced tax incentives to encourage the adoption of this green mobility solution, but there are still barriers to uptake. Reporter Emmeline Nsingi-Nkosi takes a closer look.
A report by McKinsey highlights three main consumer worries about electric vehicles. The first concern was one of affordability and the cost of ownership. Another, the power of batteries and anxiety over the distance one could travel before having to recharge. And finally, the worry over the lack of charging infrastructure to get you from A to B. But these concerns are being addressed. Falling battery costs will mean electric vehicles will be cheaper to buy in the US and Europe as soon as 2025. By 2030, battery-powered electric vehicles are expected to reach an average driving range of 350 to 400 kilometers. For the 64% of those surveyed who said inefficient charging infrastructure is preventing them from making the change, the news is good. To support electric vehicle adoption, energy company Total are implementing a whole host of infrastructure changes. I went to speak to Pierre Clasca, Vice President of the Electrical Vehicle Charge Division, who will be leading the company's strategy. Pierre, how is Total reacting to the growing demand for electric vehicles?
Basically, what we want to do is to take this opportunity when it comes to electric mobility and how we could leverage our experience or expertise in serving customers and adapting ourselves to this new environment.
How will Total achieve this?
So in order to address this major transformation, the first issue that we have to address is the deployment of infrastructure. In order to charge all these electrical vehicles, and one of the main criteria we have given ourselves is the number of charging stations, charging points, we will operate as part of our network. So we have given ourselves an ambition of operating a network of 150,000 charging points by 2025, knowing that we start end of last year by a little bit more than 20,000. It gives a good idea of the kind of challenge that we have in front of us.
And so what are the differences between home charge and fast charge?
The main difference will be the power. At home or at the office, you will have typically between 3 and 7 kilowatts. When it comes to a fast charging, it will be between 50 up to 350 kilowatts. So what does it mean? It means that you will charge 10 to 50 times quicker using this kind of facility. It will come at a price because the price of such facility is much more expensive than normal one, but because it will be only a small portion of your overall consumption, typically 5 to 20%, the overall impact will be extremely limited.
How important is it to build a network of fast charging stations across Europe and the world?
Because of its experience in service station business, Total has a strong advantage because we will leverage this position. First, what we call the highway, the traditional service station, on highway, which is of course very important. But not only, it will cover as well what we call urban nodes, so it's typically around large cities. And it will serve not only needs for standard customers, but for business customers, B2B customers as well. And typically we are talking about ride-hailing, taxis, logistics, urban logistics, for whom it's going to be very important to have the ability to recharge their cars or their vans in a very quick way because they use it for business.
What bespoke public charging services have Total launched?
We want to partner with cities, with large cities, which play this significant role in driving the transition towards e-mobility. And this is something we have done already. We have won several concessions with large cities. We have presence in the Netherlands, in the region of Amsterdam. We have a concession in the city of Brussels in Belgium. We operate the network of Source London in London. And we have been recently awarded a 10-year concession for the city of Paris. As of today, it represents more than 10,000 charging points in cities, and in the next couple of years, we have an expectation that it could be more than 25,000 charging points on the same environment.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for your time. Continual innovation and an entrepreneurial spirit are going to help us all reach a carbon neutral future. Dutch startup ChargeTrip provides smart navigation and predictive route planning at the touch of a button. Co-founders Gideon van Dijk and Peter Valler recognize that driving long distances can make EV drivers anxious.
We founded ChargeTrip basically out of our own frustration that living with an electric vehicle and using it over longer distances is a lot harder than living with an internal combustion engine car.
The hassle of having to charge in the middle of a journey causes many drivers to use their EV only for short trips. With backing from Total Carbon Neutrality Ventures, ChargeTrip developed a solution.
And let's say I want to drive from our office in Amsterdam to Berlin in my colleague's ID4, and we plan a trip. Now it sends the starting location and the destination location, including the car and the state of charge, to our API, and it calculates a route with the optimal charge stations along the way.
The route appears on the map with all the charge stations needed to complete a journey.
So the way our routing engine works is that we have, for 210 EV models at the moment, we created our own consumption models. So for instance, a Porsche can take in a lot of energy. So it can be, for instance, interesting to not drive the shortest route via a 50 kilowatt charger, but drive a slightly longer route via a 350 kilowatt charger and still arrive at your destination quicker. And the same goes for payment systems. So in addition to weather, temperature, elevation, road curvature, average speed. So you really need to look at the car and the charge infrastructure and combine that to create a predictable route plan that allow you to effortlessly use your EV like you're used to using a car.
ChargeTrip has already linked up with Porsche and BMO. BMO, an affiliate of Total, is a software platform connecting mobility professionals to electric points, fuel pumps, and to the services associated to electric vehicles. Already, over 150,000 EV drivers use the ChargeTrip software every month. Our next pit stop is a hotbed of electric mobility innovation, the Formula E Racing Championship. Motorsport has always been a testbed for technology, and Formula E, the electric rival of F1, is no different. A number of auto giants run teams and use their car races to fine-tune technology that will eventually show up in everyday models. All the teams who participate in the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship use bespoke products and technology to maximize car efficiency. Two-time champions Team DS Techeetah utilize Total Quartz EV fluids to help optimize their car performances. It's a partnership that helps motorsports at this elite level during the heat of competition.
The principle of Formula E is to take as much energy as possible from the battery and to bring it to the wheel to move the car with as low losses as possible. The quantity of energy that is stored inside a battery is similar in a Formula E than what we have in a normal car. But the very big difference is that the way we are using that energy in a Formula E is much more aggressive. Basically, the time we spend full throttle or full regeneration on a Formula E is much higher than what we have on a normal car. And once more, the key to be able to do this is the cooling of the battery. And working with a company like Total and being able to use the highest technology in the cooling fluid for the motor is very important. The second parameter is the transmission lubrication. As we know, a transmission is some mechanical part moving each other inside the gearbox, and this is creating losses. Using a very high level lubrication allows us to go a lot deeper in the development to optimize the performance of the car. It is in the direction the automotive industry is going, and the technology we are using and the proof we are doing in Formula E to show that it is possible to have very high performance electrical technology for common road cars.
Beyond entertaining racing fans, Formula E's stated purpose is to promote and advance electric cars. It's a high-speed laboratory for electric vehicle development. Back to you, Emma.
As we've seen, the mass adoption of electric-powered cars will undoubtedly be a significant driver in the transition to sustainable mobility. But what about other methods of transport, and which ones are set to make a difference? For innovative transport ideas to come to life, support for entrepreneurs is key. Total Carbon Neutrality Ventures CEO Girish Nadkarni explains how he and his team finds, funds and fosters startups with breakthrough technologies.
So we invest in a large range of technologies and business models relating mostly to smart energy, renewables, battery storage, batteries and battery recycling, plastics, bioplastics, plastic recycling, circular economy, mobility as a service, carbon to value, and energy access. We have a $400 million fund, and close to 50% of our direct investments are in mobility globally. So we're investing in companies which are in the ride-hailing business, companies like Heech. We are invested in companies which do car sharing. So whether it's companies like Scoop or whether it's companies like GetAround. We are also investing in companies in the logistics space, because logistics is also, it's not just about moving people. It's a company called OnTruck out of Spain. They operate all over Europe. It's an online platform where people can book carriers to ship their goods. There is a significant amount of idle capacity in trucks today. There are too many trucks going back and forth, either empty or half full or not full at all. And so this is an opportunity for the platform to bundle more and more packages together so that trucks go reasonably full and therefore drive a lot of efficiency. There is so much change happening, not just in technology and business models all over the world, that we have to be on top of it. We have to know what's happening. A lot of innovation is happening outside our companies, outside our industry. If you look at solar today, everybody assumes that solar PVs are very good today, they're commercially viable, etc. What people forget is that the first solar PV cell was invented in the Bell Labs in the 1950s. It's taken a good 60, 70 years for it to become commercially viable. So we can't take the risk of jumping in too soon, and we can't take the risk of waiting for too long. So one way of learning what's happening out there is taking small bets across the ecosystem. And this way we keep an eye to the ground, we know what's happening, and in one word, we are creating optionality for Total.
It can be a long journey from concept to final prototype, but here are a few new forms of transport expected to move us across land, air and sea this century. German company Volocopter aims to usher in a new era of urban air mobility with its air taxi, VoloCity. Using a vertical takeoff and landing system, it doesn't require a runway, and its innovative design can transport passengers comfortably and quietly across cities. Volocopter's air taxis are expected to take to the skies for their first commercial flights in 2023, with many cities around the world, including Singapore and Paris, set to adopt the aircraft in the coming years. Having undergone more than 1,000 test flights, it's one of the most advanced air taxis in the world.
I believe Volocopter, truly has been a pioneer in creating this industry segment by simply showing one vehicle generation after the next, moving closer to something that actually was capable of meeting the highest levels of safety that you need to meet in aviation. So more and more banks and consulting companies confirm that there's a huge market need for this type of services.
Electric-powered, low-altitude aircraft offers hope commuters will never be stuck in a traffic jam again. In Norway, passenger ferry operator Norled is building a hybrid battery and fuel cell-driven ship named Hydra. The fuel cells will be powered by liquid hydrogen, an entirely emission-free fuel.
When you have liquid hydrogen stored on board the vessel on Hydra, we can basically run and sail on hydrogen for up to 10, 14 days without refueling. It's a fully electrical driven ferry hydra using a mix of batteries and fuel cells.
Later this year, Norled's new ferry will move from the shipyard to the water, ready to carry its first passengers. Moving passengers at speed across long distances within a vacuum tube was an idea first touted in the 1800s. Today, it's a near reality. Hyperloop is the first reinvention of mass transportation for 100 years.
Virgin Hyperloop is a new form of mass transportation. So we're moving people at the speeds of an airline, on the ground, inside of a tube, and doing that to move millions of passengers per year with little to no energy consumption, or really at a fraction of the energy consumption that an airplane uses. So the goal that we have is to build Hyperloops everywhere. In India, for example, there's millions, hundreds of millions of passengers per year that want to transport between two different areas. And we see that as a national network. We see one in India, we see in the greater Middle East, being able to connect the national network. We see here in the US, you start and you build out, again, individual projects that go into a national network, and same with Europe itself. But some of the projects that we've made the furthest along are in India, between Mumbai and Pune. That's about a 120 kilometer route. And that allows you to do that in about 20 minutes, something that normally takes 4 or 5 hours in a car. Saves about 150,000 tons of CO2 per year.
On November the 8th, 2020, the first passengers traveled safely on a Hyperloop, making transportation history.
I was the first passenger to ride inside of a Hyperloop. Only 6 years before, I was sitting in a garage dreaming of riding in a Hyperloop someday. To actually be inside of it, it was one of the most surreal feelings of my whole life. To experience that, to build a team to do that, to build an industry, to build a product was tremendously exciting.
The future of sustainable mobility looks cleaner, safer, and more inclusive. Well, that's all for this edition of The Roads to Carbon Neutral. To view further content from this series, visit roadstocarbonneutral.com. Goodbye until next time. Roads to Carbon Neutral, presented by Total.